Hey, everybody. This podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. You can go to www.audibletrial.com/TNRL, which is short for This Non-Religious Life. When you go there, you can sign up for a free 30-day trial to Audible.com, and with that free 30-day trial, you get a free audiobook download. So how cool is that? Free audiobooks, free audiobook download, all courtesy of This Non-Religious Life. All you got to do is sign up. It is for free. So once again, www.audibletrial.com/TNRL, free 30-day membership. So try it out. If you like it, maybe stay. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe get something else. We're always chilling books on for Audible. So go sign up. Works out for everybody. Take it away, Ken.
I thought I was a good Christian.
Jesus died on a cross. I go to church every Sunday. Jesus got out here. Then I read that because Jesus died on a cross for a rotten hooker.
I thought I was a good Christian.
I go to church every Sunday.
I thought I was a good Christian.
I go to church every Sunday. I am a very religious person.
I thought I was a good Christian. The very lies the serpent told to Eve in the Garden of Eden. Spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of Jesus Christ. Spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of Jesus Christ. Spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of Jesus Christ. Spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of Jesus Christ. Spreads confusion and
Hey everybody, it is Monday, July 16th, 2012, This Non-Religious Life. I'm your host, Ken. All the way across the country we have Bob.
How's it going?
And Jason.
Hey, how you doing?
And we got some good news items this week. Before we jump into the real big one, I just wanted to touch on this one. This one was sort of blowing up our Facebook a bit. We got some good feedback on it. So, new study has come out from Georgetown University Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate, or CARA, saying that only about 30% of people who grew up in an atheist household remain atheists as adults, which is the lowest found among 20 separate categories in their study. Now, Bob, what do you think about this?
I'm not entirely sure about this study. It came out of an almost religious organization. At first blush, I looked over it, and it was from a group that's sort of trying to espouse a religious idea. So right away, it makes it a little suspect. And like how they made these groups, or I think this might be I don't know, maybe they're drawing correlations when there are none, or finding correlations. I'm not sure. I really haven't read this one too close. You kind of caught me off guard.
Yeah, it's weird because I don't think the data makes sense. Non-religious groups are that's one of the largest growing demographics in the religious landscape in the United States. We've had the ARIS study, which is the American religion in something identification survey. That's what it is. In 1990, only 7% of people identify, or 0.7% of people identified as agnostic or atheist. That's 8.2 identified as nones. But in 2001, it jumped to 14.2% for nones, and 15 in 2008, and I believe in 2010 they did it again, and it was 16%. It's hands down the fastest growing group. Like by comparison, total Christians from 1990 went from 86.2 all the way down to 76, dropping 10%.
Yeah, it does seem like it doesn't make sense in light of other studies that we've read about. And
yeah.
I really think, like, if you want to take this one apart, you'd have to really get down to the nitty gritty about their methodology and how they arrived at these numbers. But I agree, it doesn't make sense in light of other studies.
Yeah, it really doesn't. You have, total Christian drop 10.2%, and then the nuns jump up 6.8% in, 18 years. That doesn't seem to jive with the idea that, atheists are the more wishy-washy group that tends to lose members faster. But who knows? It could be just the disparate amount of people who identify as either one of those groups. If, say, what was it? Lutherans lose 41% of their flock over 20 years. That's certainly more than atheists losing 60%. Just for the fact that there are more Lutherans. But I don't know. Yeah, it seems really suspect.
Well, don't you think that this article was put out, this study was put out? Because when I read it, it just seemed like it was something that it was kind of, they were creating their own ammunition to use for the flock, to see, showing their own people that are in their own church and their own circles, saying, look, you're in the right path, because look at all these atheists, they can't even hang on to their own ideas, and you're good because you're not wishy-washy on your beliefs. That's what it kind of sounded like to me. Is like this was just something they created for themselves, to use for themselves, to boost morale with themselves.
Yeah. The amount of people in the survey is kind of suspect, because I guess it says 432 weighted respondents said they were raised atheists, but 400 people is not a
I don't
statistically viable survey.
You know what? The reason I wasn't able to dig into this too much was because they don't link to the journal article, and I went to the website for the group that did it, which was the Center for Applied Research in the Apostate, and they didn't have a link to their article there either. I couldn't find it, so I didn't understand what their numbers meant, where they said that there was. They said 1,387 atheists. And then in parentheses, they say it's weighted. Like, weighted how? Weighted why? What does that mean?
Yeah.
That's like, I'm not saying it's bad science, but I need to know why you weighted it, or how is it weighted? Why would you weight it? It doesn't, this study doesn't make sense, and it definitely bears further scrutiny.
Yeah, definitely. And let's see. Yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely cautious of the numbers, because, like I said, 432 weighted respondents is not a statistically viable survey.
Yeah, right. Like how much confidence is there in their numbers? Like, what are their confidence intervals in their statistics? I mean, there's a lot of things, a lot of questions to ask, and I couldn't even find the study to dig a little deeper.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, it just, I don't know. There are a lot of problems with this, and I mean, I hope to eventually find the research itself and maybe read through it to see what they had to say. But from first glance, I mean, you definitely have to take the source of the study into question, and also the outlet that's publishing it, which is christianpost.com. So it definitely seems like a sort of, like Jason said, like a morale booster tool.
Yeah. Like, hey guys, doing a good job, keep it up.
Yeah.
Wow, man, I ain't popping.
But that, I mean, even that seems interesting, because they have Hindus being the most the people who have the highest retention rate, followed by Jews and Muslims, and then Greek Orthodox, Mormons, Catholics, and then Protestants behind Catholics. But I don't know. It's weird.
If I had to guess, I would guess that Catholics have to be the most declining religious group.
Yeah, well, let's see. What do the demographics say? The demographics make Catholics drop to full percent. Baptists actually drop 3.5. Methodist 3.1. Lutheran 1.4.
Are you looking at the Pew Research numbers?
I'm looking at the ARIS research numbers
ARIS?
over from 1990 to 2008.
Okay.
Catholics actually maintain their grip better than Baptists, Methodists, and Lutherans. Way better than unspecified Protestants.
So in that study, the non-believers were the fastest growing group, right?
Yeah, absolutely. 6.8% over.
Who's the second fastest growing group?
Second fastest group would appear to be non-denominational Christians. Yeah. The only other group that's growing at a rate of more than 1%.
So that study, the Kara study that was in the link about atheism's retention, I don't know how true it is, but the guy makes the statement that atheists aren't raised atheists; they're made atheists or something like that. And so I don't know. Like it seems like a lot of doublespeak in that I wasn't raised atheist and yet I am. So where am I in that data? Like how many atheist families are there? Very few. I'd be interested because they get into where the atheists go, like what religions they end up as, the people who drop out of atheism. I'd be interested to see where all those Christians go, like the 41% of Lutherans or the 40% of Baptists go. You know, how many of them either switch denominations or become atheists? Yeah, I don't know. I'd really like to get my hands on that study. Yeah. It's I don't know. It's weird. It's really weird. I was reading through it and I was like, there's no way any of this is right. It's just so suspect. Yeah, and I'm like, from the text of the article, the thing that threw the red flag for me was not just the source of the study or the source of the publication, but where it started saying that their numbers were weighted. Yeah, I mean that's typical in surveys, especially if you want to even out uneven groups, but right, but shouldn't there be a discussion of like how the numbers were weighted? Yeah, and how certainly. That skews the confidence in the statistical analysis. Sigma 1. Yeah. Yeah. No. I definitely want to try and find the study, but you said you had a hard time finding it, huh? Yeah, I couldn't dig it up. That's weird. I just want to make a comment at the bottom of the page on the Christian Post. The article suggested is combating atheism with sola scriptura. Yeah. I saw that too. That doesn't work. I thought it was somebody's idea of a joke. Yeah. The Bible is right. Here, let me quote the Bible at you to tell you why it's right. Yeah. So, with that said, let's jump into our next thing. This is going to take up most of the hour for sure. So, Jason, you posted this on the Facebook, so why don't you introduce it?
All right.
Jason was busy pushing buttons and stuff.
I guess
we got to make sure he works hard.
Yeah, I have to do everything. No, I'm just kidding. Which article is it? This is the article of the family who kept their daughter in a chicken coop, which is, the wire mesh pen, made her wear a shock collar because she didn't do her chores properly and was being punished. And when the parents were asked, why were you punishing her this way, they responded, because that's what the Bible tells you. That the Bible says so. They're just following the Bible. And the way people found out about this was the neighbor complained to the authorities about this young girl being abused like this. So that's the article.
The whole article got me thinking about, and I think we had touched on it before. There was the case in Oregon. I think it was in Oregon of the little girl of the Schatz family that she was killed. Her parents beat her to death, and they were following the guidelines and rules put forth by the Pearl family, who wrote a book on Amazon called, it's available on Amazon, and it's called How to Train Up a Child, and it's a biblical guide to raising your children, and lots of biblical child rearing involves corporal punishment, and it just got me thinking about, this is something, like I said, I lay a lot at the feet of religion, and so I decided to conduct an entirely non-scientific survey this morning, and I just Googled religious child abuse, and if you Google religious child abuse,
that's scary.
You get 34 million hits, and they're all, and for the
no
most
pun
part,
intended.
Yeah,
yeah, that was bad. Sorry.
Yeah. Child abuse hits home in religious communities.
Oh my God!
We just fell off the cliff on that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But in most, like skimming through, Google that and skim through them, and what you got, there was a couple of blog sites where people were archiving religious-related child abuse stories, and but most of them were stories of abuse by people who were religiously motivated to do so, and that's absolutely wrong. And then I thought, well, what I'll do in my non-scientific survey is I Googled secular child abuse and I Googled atheist child abuse, and both of those searches came up with about 2 million hits, but most of those were news sites on websites that had the word atheist or secular in the title, and they were reporting religious child abuse. So it was pretty skewed. It was pretty lopsided. And this is becoming a problem.
I wouldn't even say it's becoming a problem, but it is a large problem and has been for a long time. The funny thing about this is you always hear the phrase "spare the rod, spoil the child," and people say it's in the Bible. It's in there somewhere. Don't worry about it. It's in there somewhere. It's not. It's not in the Bible. It's one of those things. People always say.
There was one news article that they were listing these proverbs that sort of advocated corporal punishment. And none of them were spare the rod, spoil the child. But there was something about, like, childish foolishness is beaten out with the rod or something like that.
Well,
yeah,
according to the chat room, it is
22:15.
in the Bible, according to Matt, and it's in Proverbs, the rod passage.
There's a similar passage in Proverbs 13:24. It's he that spareth the rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes. But spare the rod, spoil the child isn't.
So would it be fair to say that if you had a even not even a literal, but a moderate interpretation of biblical scripture, it advocates corporal punishment?
Well, it's one of those things where it depends on if you're coming at it from a liberal perspective or a conservative perspective. A liberal perspective, you're looking at it and you're seeing, say a lot of it like in, where is it? We talk about corporal punishment in the book of First Kings or Second Chronicles. It's mostly talking about raising of King Rehoboam. He was kind of a douche, and no one liked him. And it's sort of a chastising of how Solomon raised him. But I mean, sure, there's definitely some stuff in Proverbs, and even in Hebrews 12, that kind of talks about, corporal punishment. But I mean, hell, we don't embrace slavery today, and that's in the Bible too. It's one of those things where they pick and choose what they want. If they feel that corporal punishment is right, then they're going to go to the Bible and they're going to find passages to justify it. Just like was done with slavery in the 1800s, just like was done with any number of things. War, genocide. I mean, the Holocaust was justified on biblical grounds.
Well, in the chat room, Matt is saying that he is for spanking. Is spanking wrong? I think, I think in that aspect, though, what Ken's talking about and versus spanking, don't really fall in the same category. Putting your child in a chicken coop, putting shock collars on them, writing a book how physical abuse where there's mental and physical harm done to the child. That's a little bit different from spanking.
The current consensus among psychologists and people who are experts on child development is that corporal punishment does no good. The current consensus is that hitting your child, spanking your child, corporal punishment teaches them to be obedient and to fear you. It doesn't foster those parent-child relationships that we all have these idolized notions of.
Yeah, no, that's true.
The current consensus is that spanking does no good.
Yeah, that's been the consensus for a couple decades now. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a child development specialist, but all the literature I've read has pointed to the fact that
I'm not a
spanking,
child psychologist either.
especially male children, is just really not a good idea. Moreover, it reinforces the idea that force is justifiable.
Yeah, but see, here's where I take issue with all of this, and here's where I lay this at the feet of religion, is that people who spank their children and people who utilize corporal punishment, and I'm not saying that they're going to go overboard and put their child in a chicken coop, because obviously that is the worst example of parenting ever, but the people who utilize corporal punishment on their children, they do that with almost a biblical mandate to do so.
Yeah.
The Bible provides them dispensation to act in that manner, and then that just opens the door for people to fall into these bizarre, extreme patterns of abuse, i.e., putting their children in chicken coops. And it starts with a religion and a Bible, a scripture, a holy book that tells them that it's okay.
Yeah. Again, it comes down to the idea that taking the Bible as an infallible object, any justification you find in it is absolute. And if you do adhere to a certain negative habit, or a negative viewpoint, you can always find justification in something that you take to be infallible, even if it isn't necessarily in there. You know.
Who's the guy that there's like a whole list of culprits here, and Debbie and Danny, is it Debbie and Danny Pearl, is that their name, that wrote I know it's Pearl is their last name, and I'm sure Debbie is the wife. I guess Daniel is the husband. They're almost at the top of the list, and then the other guy that is culpable in all of this is the Focus on the Family guy, Jimmy Dobson.
Yeah, I don't know. It's Michael Pearl, and let me see.
James
Michael Pearl and someone else, but
Debbie is his wife.
Yeah. Okay.
But so then there's James Dobson with the Focus on the Family group, and he wrote a book in the 70s that advocated corporal punishment. His book was called hold on, I had it bookmarked here.
I think, well, while he's looking at that, the How to Train Up a Child has been, which is terrifying that there's over 600,000 of these books in circulation, which is insane. That's an insane amount of copies.
Dobson's book from 1970 was called Dare to Discipline.
Nice. But yeah, How to Train Up a Child has been, what is it? Let's see. It was found in the Williams home, and the Williams were a family that locked their adopted daughter from Ethiopia in an unheated barn and starved her. She wasn't allowed bathroom in the house and instead had to use a porta potty behind the barn. And she was struck with a plumbing tool, a tube with a round ball on the end.
In that book, How to Train Up a Child, they provide instructions on how to manufacture that plumbing tool rod.
Yeah.
You're given explicit instructions. Go to the hardware store. Buy a 1/4-inch tubing. Buy this kind of tape. Wrap it up in this way. It's horrible.
Yeah. In the book, they also advocate punishing picky eaters with either fasting or force feeding.
Yeah, that kind of behavior is despicable, and I fall back on the sort of the Dawkins take on this, in that moderate views leave the, that moderate acceptance of like, well, it's okay. Who am I to say about how a parent should raise their child? Spanking is okay as long as it doesn't go. Those moderate views leave the door open to extreme behavior.
But I think there's something really, really bizarre about extreme behavior, and it's not exclusive. I think it's just an issue of, and we talk about it on the Coalesce show, and I'm going to expand on it this week. But there's something really weird about the dynamic of religious power and the dynamic of governmental power. Because, I mean, we know, like, child labor is wrong. We have organizations and governments that go into other countries to say that child labor is wrong. They go and fight and try to get children out of child labor. But did you know in the United States that it's legal to have child labor in the agribusiness out in the fields? There's no regulations in the United States for child labor. So there's children picking the crops and stuff. So I guess the point that I'm getting to is not that there's something very strange and there's a dynamic that people, whether it's religion, whether it's power, whether it's money, these values that we normally put on the shoulders of Christianity, or these morals that we put on doing good deeds, fall apart when there's this new element that gives them the authority, no matter whether it's with Christ or with
that. I think that's a really interesting point, and I love it when things overlap. And I found this overlap between human trafficking and tacit religious approval of child abuse. There is the United Nations has been trying to push through it's called the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which would, I guess it would put into place procedures and protections for children, globally. And there are 2 countries that have not ratified this contract.
Let me guess.
I'll tell you, one of them is Sudan. Guess what the other one is?
Canada?
The United States of America. This was something that the President Obama, he said that it was embarrassing that we have not ratified this yet, and he has said that he would, push this forward or make it an issue, but there's a lot of other things going on.
He has too much agribusiness behind him.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, maybe, but of all of the United Nations participants, 2 nations have not ratified this, and one of them is us. This is embarrassing. Yeah. And the reason we haven't ratified it yet is there's religious opposition to it.
Why? Why would there be opposition?
Well, one of the things is there's language in one of the articles that religious leaders, religious conservatives feel it would get in the way of homeschooling. Because I think that one of the provisions reads such that children should have access to public schools or something like that, or education, some kind of education issue, and there's religious opposition to it because they feel it would get in the way of homeschooling.
Well, we'll probably talk about this on Coalesce. For those who don't know, is another podcast that I do with Matt. And we were talking about, I read this book, which really upset me that he let me borrow. So I said, we need to go out. We need to go out in the field, and actually, I want to see what's going on. I want to help, and I want to see this. And he's like, all right, we can go to church. We can go to Honduras with my church. And, the first initial thought in my head was, why are we going to Honduras when the working poor is right here? There's children in the field. There are people who are in debt bondage. That's happening right now in the States. But I let it go. And then as was looking into Honduras and just what's going on there, it's funny how embedded Christians missions are in countries where there's U.S. government trying to control aspects of it. I mean, right now Honduras is in the heart, and we have government officials gunning down the drug lords in Honduras right now for the drug war, and innocent people being killed. People out in the field working are being shot and killed on this. And I just think it's kind of funny that, like those 3 people that were hitchhiking and doing missionary work in Iran, they got held hostage and stuff. It's just really weird. I don't understand why Christian groups need to be in. I mean, I understand there's a desire to help people. If at the core value, it's a genuine. I hope that it's a genuine belief. Well, but on that flip side, people will go, well, maybe that's just being kind of a conspiracy theorist or just reading too much into it. But Regent University has on their website, you can go right now, where you can take tours if you're a student or a high school student or planning on going to Regent, where you can go take tours and meet the high-ups of Homeland Security, where you can meet the high-ups in the Pentagon, where they are so entrenched with the military side of the government. It's awkward. I don't have any proof that there's like this conspiracy. I just find it interesting that it's too similar.
Well, I guess with regards to mission work, I mean, you could easily say that where things are the worst is where help is needed the most. So,
But it goes back to that. It goes to back
plot
that.
There.
But it goes back to that definition of what I guess. What is your definition of the worst? Because the people they're helping in Honduras. Well, take for example right now. It's the working poor. We have Panasonic down there that keep people in debt bondage, that keep them in sweatshop factories. But the mission work, that's where it would be worst in that situation, not on farms where people happen to just be poor and not have.
Well, yeah, I mean,
and not to mention of all the people who are in this country who are in the same situation, and we just turn a blind eye to it. I mean, right now it's legal for children to work in the fields. And it happens in every state. Anywhere there's big agribusiness happening, where there's fields, there's, picking strawberries, doing onions, doing whatever. There are children. There's a documentary that I'm going to be working on a project with called The Harvest. And they interview one of the kids that pick strawberries and onions. And these companies do not care about these children. They spray the pesticides straight on them while they're in the fields. Got to the point where the kid's skin started falling off because of the reaction to the pesticides. And yet we're fighting in other countries trying to get child labor to end when we have the shit going on right here. But that's a different story. That's another podcast. But
yeah, I'm not sure how to address that other than to say like you're right.
I don't want to be right.
And maybe reform and improvement needs to begin at home, of which I agree, but
relating it back to anyway, go ahead, sorry.
No, you're right. I mean, those are things that we look abroad and find problems, and there's problems on our own doorstep, and I only bring it up. I only bring it up to I guess highlight the point that that UN resolution, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, is opposed by religious groups in the United States, but all right. So the Contract for the Rights of the Child, that wouldn't apply to just children overseas. It would apply to children all over the world. It would be a global thing, with the United States included. Why are we staying apart from that? It would be a measure to protect children, to prevent child abuse globally, not just overseas or in someone else's nation, in ours as well.
And it goes back to that. Anytime there's the element of power, economic gain, or people just lose their mind.
I'm only half joking when I say that the reason why a lot of churches go overseas to do their mission work and stuff like that, rather than our own, rural backyard, is because most of the kids in our rural backyard are already Christian. In Central America, if you look at the farms down there, like even the cacao farms, and the working poor, they are already and we talked about this on the other podcast. They already have their faith with God. They're majority Catholic or a spin-off of that, and so they've already. So going in and trying to convert them to Christian is, or to say the reason we're not attacking this, it just shows. I mean, we even highlighted it in with Matt's answer and the other. It's like it's not. It's almost like it's not the right religion, so that's why they're going to convert. Yeah. Well, when you're talking about evangelical Christians, you say you're Catholic, you might as well say you're a Satanist. Catholicism is such at the opposite end of the spectrum, especially when you get into the idea of something as alien as Latin American Catholicism, which is, by all regards, alien to even normal Catholics.
Yeah. But it doesn't discredit their connection with Christ or with God, because by all means they carry the same book. So I don't know. I just it's
Yeah.
the more I dig into it, the more frustrated I get with it. It's just there's too much.
Yeah, that's the funny thing with social issues. The more you dig into it, the more mad you get. But yeah, I really do think that the problem is a majority of rural Christians in the United States are already Protestants, though. Whereas when you go down to Latin America, majority of them are going to Catholic. So it's right God, wrong religion, and that's how a lot of Protestants see it. You know, there was a thing I saw recently, and it was this list of things to keep your children away from because they lead to Satanism, and one of them was Catholicism.
What?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Well,
Yeah.
Matt is in the chat room saying that, and it's the lack of personal conversion is also something that plays into the understanding of Latin Catholicism. I don't.
Well, what about All right. Well, so what about the who was that religious leader that was arrested, or his name was like Clayford Dollar or something like that. He was a Southern Baptist megachurch minister.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. He's a Dollar. Yeah, he's a prosperity gospel minister. And what a name to have.
Yeah, I know, Dollar, I know, right?
Yeah.
But he was either his daughter and her friend or something filed charges against him because they claimed that he like punched her and abused her. She wasn't like a little kid. She was a teenager or a tweenager or something like that. But now he's clearly he's a religious leader. He is a prominent religious leader, and now he's going around saying that the devil made him do it. It was a devil, a demon that was inside of him.
Yeah.
That's why he abused his child.
Yeah, Creflo Dollar.
Creflo Dollar, that's
Creflo
it.
Dollar.
Matt
I know,
says,
it slipped my mind, but I was like,
is it true that he really beat her? He said he says that he originally denied it, and I don't know anybody who's ever been in charge of such a crime who did not deny it first.
Well, he's abuse by a family member is horrible, and it's something hard to accuse somebody of, and it's not easy to stand up to your attacker because you're beaten down, you're afraid of them. Yeah. I think he did it, and I think he did it because his religion dictated he behaved that way.
Matt said that he denied it when he addressed his congregation.
His congregation, yeah. Yeah, I'm reading that now.
So where does the devil come into that?
I don't know.
I saw a news story where he said it's
about that.
or maybe he says it's the work of the devil that he's being accused of it. Still think
that's possible.
What are you saying that is not true at all, Matt? Finish that thought. He didn't abuse. Oh, he said it's not true at all because he didn't abuse her because of his religion. Said it was okay. And he says any Christian would say what he did was bad. Is what he.
Not any Christian. Daniel Pearl, a Christian, would have said that he probably should have used the tool that he could have learned how to make, and if he read his book.
Michael Pearl. Yeah, no. I think any rational Christian, but then again, I mean, any rational human being would say that it's wrong. Unfortunately, there are a lot. I mean, 600,000 copies of To Train Up a Child sold, you know?
You know, that's an interesting point, Ken, because I would say that a rational person would say that he behaved inappropriately. A rational person would have said he behaved inappropriately. Rationality comes first. A Christian person, depending on their outlook, may say he did everything right. He did everything he was supposed to do as a parent trying to raise his child to fear God. But no rational person would say he behaved appropriately.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, a rational Christian, yes, a rational Christian would probably say the same thing as a rational person. Rationality is first. But a Christian person, with rationality aside, could easily say that guy did everything he was supposed to do. And I think that's an important distinction to make.
Yeah, I one of the things always important to make those distinctions about, you know, what is rational and what is simply being defended.
Right. Your religious convictions allow you to circumvent rationality.
But the chat room is saying that that there was 250,000 copies of Dianetics sold. That doesn't mean all Americans are made up of Scientologists.
No. But some people looked at Scientology like I did and said, "Oh, this is crap," and threw it away.
Yeah,
so
no,
I think the point
think,
he's... go ahead. Sorry, Ken. Go ahead.
I mean, I think the difference between Dianetics and to train up a child is sheer curiosity could drive you to pick up a copy of Dianetics. You know, Dianetics is technically a self-help book, not necessarily a Scientology conversion work. However, a lot of people convert to Scientology, which is unfortunate in its own right and its own.
No, you're right. Dianetics was marketed as a self-help book.
To train up a child, I mean, that, it just seems like the motivation to buy that would be different than to buy, say, Dianetics.
If you look on Amazon.com to train up a child, there's about 2,000 reviews posted for it, and they're pretty evenly split. About 1,000 of these reviews are 5 stars, like, "Oh, I do this at home, and my child is so great, and he's so well disciplined, and I take him everywhere, and people always compliment me on how great my child is." And then the other 1,000 reviews are people who are like, "My mom used this technique on me. I am scarred for life. I'm still in therapy. This is an awful, 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 awful book. Get it gone now. Like, it needs to go away." There seems to be no in between. There doesn't seem to be anybody that was like, "Yeah, I read it and whatever." Nobody has any middle of the road thoughts about it. It's either the greatest thing ever or the worst thing ever.
Yeah. So all right, let's use that number. Let's say it's 50-50 split. That's still 300,000 copies out there in homes of people who, you know, embrace this idea. That's a terrifying number. That's I mean, it's only, say, you know, what, 0.1% of the population, but still.
That's still a lot of people beating the crap out of their kids when it's not necessary to do so.
But do you think the people who do the extreme violence of beating their kids, of causing harm to their kids, would do it no matter if it was the Bible or not? They would just find something else to justify it?
That's an interesting question, and I think you might be right, but I think that even a generous answer would say that religion is just the most convenient excuse.
It's the most widely accepted excuse.
Yeah. No. It's one thing just to get like tacit approval from anything, but when you perceive tacit approval coming from, you know, religion, and then by extension, you know, God himself, it definitely holds a little more water than, I mean, anything else, really.
Well, yeah. in the chat room again, it says just because the KKK claims to be Christian doesn't mean they represent Christianity.
No, and fucking thankfully they don't.
I mean, I don't know.
No, they do. They do represent Christianity. They represent the worst face of Christianity.
Yeah, but they don't. What Matt's saying is they don't represent Christianity as a whole, which thankfully they don't. You can't say that they do. But they're definitely in there. You know, the fact that the doors haven't been closed to them, and they haven't been openly shunned. Is
if we look at the bad things that the KKK stand for, which is a lot of fucking bad things,
yeah.
but the core that is what is mostly known is racism. Where do they get their value of racism? Where do they get their value that blacks are lessers? Where do they get their values that if they are the sect that hates Jewish people?
Right,
where do they get their values?
I'll be generous here and say that they get those values from their cultural upbringing, but that cultural upbringing is defended by biblical scripture.
Well, if you want to talk about how they view Jews or how they view African Americans, a lot of it is entrenched in their own particular brand of, but it is theology. They have things like the seed line identity for Jews. They have a whole ton of things. I mean, they justified slavery with Leviticus 25:44. It's cultural upbringing, and it is cultural, but it's entrenched in a religious culture.
And is that because, like we said before, is that because it's an easy, widely accepted justification, or is it because that they're sick and twisted already, and they're
receive
just
your approval coming from God Himself? Then makes so much easier. It's easy to ignore any sort of cognitive dissonance about whether or not you might be right when you perceive it as a divine mandate.
So I guess the question that we're asking is not really just kind of nitpicking at looking at all the negatives that people do. They use the Bible to justify it. Is like, why is it so? I guess the question is why is it so readily available that it's so easy for people to use the Bible to justify their twisted and sick ways?
I don't know why it's so easy, but I think a more important question, and a question that's germane to the discussion today, is when people use the Bible to defend corporal punishment for their children, why do we accept it?
Yeah.
When rationality, reason, science, the best we can do intellectually says that this is not the way, but when people say, well, spare the rod, spoil the child, it's in the Bible, blah, 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 and we go, oh, all right, well.
Okay, so the other question is because in the chat room they answered me and said because people are sick and twisted, that's why they can do this. So how does being sick and twisted fall into God's plan and the whole big picture of it?
Well, now you're getting into the problem of evil, and I'm sure a theologist would say, well, we're born into sin and we're born sick and twisted, which I find that reprehensible. I don't like being told that I'm born shameful and wicked. That's that idea of the fall, I guess, which I reject that notion.
So if you reject the notion that we are not born predetermined to be sick and twisted, it means that there's some kind of societal influence or some kind of biological mistake that has caused you to become what we quote as sick and twisted.
I don't know. Behavior is a spectrum, and like all large populations with large, broad spectrums, there's going to be, it's going to fit a bell curve, and for every person that behaves morally and responsibly and are these models of citizenship, there's going to be somebody else on the other end that's going to behave exactly the opposite of that. They're going to be, these vile characters, and
so you're saying there has to be that balance? Is that what you're saying? There has to be.
No, I'm just saying there doesn't have to be that balance. I'm just saying when you look at it, that's what it is. It's a bell curve, and why there are those people, why there are those people at those extreme ends, I don't know. I guess there's people thinking about it right now, and so that's the idea. Like, are the the serial killers, those really vile characters that we think of, are they born or are they made? I don't know.
Yeah.
And people are trying to think about that question. And you know what? If you know that they're born, then does that mean that you have an obligation to keep them from being born? And if we know that they're made, then do you have an obligation to remove those environmental factors that cause them to be that way? I mean, it's really complicated. It's a really, really complicated, complex issue that there's no easy answer for.
Didn't and I may be way off on this, but didn't Darwin say something to the fact that, and I know I'm going to butcher this, but pretty much he hopes that people like that don't breed, that people who have
well, all right, first of all,
I should look it up before you even talk.
I think I see where you're going with it, and even if he did say it, Darwin didn't know a lot. I mean, he had a big idea, and he turned out he was right about that, but there was a lot he didn't know about, and there's a lot that he didn't understand about his own idea, and so that's not really the case in a nutshell. I mean, like I said, it's much more complicated than that.
Well, I think what we should do is leave the show as that, because we are out of time. Think about it. Maybe we'll continue a little bit of it next week.
Yeah.
I mean, right, but this almost gets into theodicy, the problem of evil, which we've gone around that circle again. Like, it's like it's one of those things you just can't stop talking.
You can't stop talking.
Once you stop talking,
there was an interesting discussion on Matt's Facebook recently about theodicy. It's a lot of fun. I always love diving into theodicy because it's one of those things you could talk about for hours and hours and hours, and not necessarily get anywhere, especially if it's a back and forth discussion. But it's enough to make your head spin. But with that, thanks to everyone in the chat room. If you're just tuning in now, just know that we do broadcast live, and you can come join us in the chat room and leave feedback and make comments throughout the show, and we address it. We're not just talking to voices in our heads. If you have any questions or comments, 757-337-2195. You can call the Zombie Popcorn hotline, leave a voicemail. I encourage people to do that. It'd be really cool if we got that, and maybe Jason could play it on the show or something. Email us, nonreligious@zombie-popcorn.com, and find us on Facebook, Google+, iTunes, Stitcher Radio. And just go to the website, zombiepopcorn.com, sign up for the newsletter, you get all the information there. A lot of good giveaways. I'm jealous I'm not living in Norfolk anymore. I would totally enter for the current giveaway. Very, very jealous. So check that out, and we will see you next time.
Real quick, I just want to let people know we're going to start doing, I tested it out today and it worked fine. We're going to start doing live broadcast on YouTube and in Google Plus Hangouts. So if you are on Google Plus and you have a webcam, you can actually join in on the conversation. We'll be able to see you, hear you. So if we're saying something, you want to throw in your comments, you can do so live while we're doing it, and hopefully make the conversation even more dynamic. And kind of more of an advanced version of the chat room that we have now. We'll keep both chat rooms going, the live one with video and the text chat room, just so we can make sure everybody's heard. So remember that for next time. Got a webcam, join us in Google Hangouts. Have a good night.
Later.
Good night.
I thought I was a good Christian.
Jesus died on a cross. I go to church every Sunday. This got out here. Then I read that because Jesus died on a cross for a rotten hooker.
I thought I was a good Christian.
I go to church every Sunday.
I thought I was a good Christian.
I go to church every Sunday. I'm a very religious person.
I thought I was a good Christian.
The very lies the serpent told to Eve in the Garden of Eden. Garden of Eden. Garden of Eden. The gospel of Jesus Christ. Spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of Jesus Christ. Spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of Jesus Christ. Spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of Jesus Christ. Spreads confusion and promotes lies.